knew a storm was coming. I grew up in Florida, so a hurricane was nothing new to me. And in fact, I was more prepared for this storm than I ever was before. My husband was away in New Jersey for work, and he was supposed to fly in that day. It was myself, my 1-year-old, my mom who'd been staying with us to help with our kid, her 2 mobility assist service animals, and our dog. Our apartment was built on the Swananoa River. We were in an elevated home, so our first story was technically the 2nd floor. Around 10 years ago, there was another flood in Asheville. Our building was perfectly fine throughout that. No water actually got into the buildings, just in that stilted area. On Thursday, it was raining all day while we were doing our preparations, and we weren't concerned at that point. Friday around 3:30 a.m., I woke up and the water was a good 2 to 3 feet above the riverbank. At this point, the parking lot's underwater and it is dark out. It's the mountains, it's unsafe. We're unable to try to traverse that with our 1-year-old and the dogs. By this point, I've been updating Quinn how fast the water is rising. Around 5 a.m., the police were driving up and down the upper road shouting evacuation warnings, and they couldn't even get to our door to notify us, so we knew we couldn't get out by road at that point. Our upstairs neighbors, Frank and Lauren, called us, and I began to pack our bags thinking we're gonna get water in our apartment, worst case scenario, so let's move upstairs. So the baby's asleep, I pump one more time, I start packing our items. Frank and Lauren come downstairs, help my mom and me move everything upstairs, and then water starts to come into our apartment from our patio. I wake up the baby and take him upstairs, and we move the dogs up, and we think we're settling in there for a week. So at this point, we're inside of Frank and Lauren's apartment, and as soon as we got in there, we see the houses floating by. We can see how serious this was and the destruction that was already happening. Quinn is on the phone with Frank while Quinn's at the airport trying to get back, and he's telling us, we need to get out, we need to get out. Lauren's on the phone with the police. They're telling us they can't come and help. We just need to get to higher ground. So at that point, we knew we needed to escape.
My son Quinn called saying, come get my family, they're stuck. And then they sent the video. The video was of the water rising up to their apartment. And the only thing that I could think of was they have to get out of that apartment now. And the problem was we couldn't communicate with Bonnie. We had no way to call her. At that instant, I knew that I had to get in the car and go. And Dana said that Ryan is on standby, and I said, I hate to have to ask him, but he's 3 hours ahead. He could be there by the time I get to Knoxville. So we made the call to you, Ryan, and you took off, and I took off, and I just drove straight, fast, full of worry and anxiety, trying to figure out what was going on. Didn't know if they were drowned or if they made it out. There wasn't any really way to communicate that.
There's a road about 12 feet across from our stairwell. We grab the 20-foot dog leash that my mom has, and we tie it off at the top of the stairs, and Frank goes across first. He went underwater a handful of times. The water was about 20 plus feet deep at that point, so it's up a steep embankment as well. So he's getting across, he gets up, he's choked on the river water a handful of times. He catches his breath, we make sure he's okay. He notices, he looks up the road, and then he says, guys, we've got to go now, there's a wall of water coming. I grab the leash and I get in the water to go across. I take the leash and I get into the water. I'm holding the leash in one arm, and I go around the edge of the stairs and I climb up as high as I can. And Lauren, who has Henry at this point, hands him over the balcony and drops him down to me. So I hold him up in this arm, and he's screaming at this point, and all I knew was he was not going under that water no matter what it took. So I swim across the embankment, get up on the land. I hand him off to Frank. I get back in the water, swim back across. Lauren takes the leash, she goes, throws the leash back. So I'm over, it's time to get the dogs across, and my mom. So our dog Tonka is about 10 years old, and she can't swim very well. So we're trying to use the other dogs to help motivate her to get into the water. So my mom goes in with her 2 service dogs, 1 on each arm with their harnesses, and they're going across. Tonka comes in with me. Tonka pulls me underwater a handful of times because she's terrified. So we get her across, and I know I need to go back for that dog leash. So I swim back across a third time. I climb up the edge of the stairs. I tie off the dog leash. I get it, and I go back across one more time. At this point, the water is up on our ankles, but we are so happy to be on what we're considering dry land. We start walking our way up the road, and the water is getting to our knees at that point. There's a woman about 2 buildings down who steps out of her door, and she has her keys in hand, and she's trying to get to her car. I ask her if I can walk straight across where she is through the driveway, if it's safe there. And I have Henry in one arm, the dog leash in that hand, and I get across to her, and I say, you need to come with us. The water's halfway up your car, you can't drive out of here. So I take her hand, guide her out, and so she's walking with us. She's terrified, understandably as well, so I tell her we need to move faster because the water's rising. At this point, the water is up to our chest, so I'm trying to hold Henry up so he doesn't get water on his face, because that dirty water, I don't want touching him. Water's here to me, and we just hear shouting, and we look up, and up a 25-foot hill is just some folks, and they're waving, they want to help. They throw down a rope. Frank has the rope, and Lauren and my mom is near them, so they start going up, and I take the dog leash and I throw it up to one of the gentlemen, and he grabs it, hands it off to somebody else, and then he sees that I have a baby, and he runs down the hill. As soon as our bodies are out of the water enough, he runs down to where we are on the hill, and he took his jacket off, and he said, "For your baby," and he threw it over my naked, screaming child. We are climbing a leash and a rope, and we're getting up, and as soon as both feet are on a solid ground out of the water, I hold onto a tree, and I say, "Please go help my mom. She's disabled. Please go help my mom." There's another guy, I say, "Can you help that dog? Because my dog is trying to take off. She's trying to get out." So they're helping my mom, they're helping the dogs, everyone else is up. And then we get up, and I just fall to the ground for a second, and they're trying to help me up and get me into the church that was right there, and I just needed a second because we're on dry land at this point. So they get us into the church, and Henry is still screaming. They bring out towels and blankets, and it was the pastor, was the gentleman that gave me his jacket. I can feel something is biting my skin. I didn't know what it was, so I'm worried that it's doing that to Henry. So I grabbed him, opened the bag, grabbed a dry pair of clothes and a diaper, and I take him into a quiet bathroom, so it's just he and I have my phone flashlight, and I take off his clothes, and I check him. There's no bites on him. He has no marks on him except for little scratches. And I get him in a diaper, and I just get a fresh towel, and I wrap him on me and just hold him against me. Thankfully, we had some milk. All the breast milk that I had in a bag ready to go at the front door didn't make it with us out of the apartment. So I had a little bit left in a bottle and gave it to him, extremely watered down, and it settled him. I change into dry clothes. Her and Frank change into dry clothes. I go back, and I'm just holding my baby, just thankful to be in a safe space. We look outside, and the water's almost parallel with the ground that we're on, and we're up about 30 feet at this point. So in the time that happened, the water went halfway to the 3rd story of the apartments. We're watching buildings float by. We're watching bodies float by. Building 1 of our apartment community, the 6 buildings, building 1 broke off and turned almost a complete 180, and we can see that there's people inside the building. And my mom has Henry safe inside, and I'm outside screaming, like, come on, get out. And the pastor and his son-in-law and a couple other community members are trying to throw ropes across. By the time I came outside, Lauren told me that one of them washed away and the other one was still inside the building. At some point, I look over and I see the water is halfway up our cars that we parked on a very high hill behind a business that we were told, your cars are fine up there. So we're seeing our cars half filled with water, and then I watch my mom's big truck wash away. We witnessed a tree fall down as a building crashed into it. It's washing it away, and as the tree went down, the roots came up and there was a body attached that floated away. we keep hearing screams for help, and we look across and there's this woman trying to get out of her building way across the river from us in the River Knoll community. And we're just all shouting, "Get up on your roof, get up on your roof." And before you know it, the water is covering her window completely. And we don't know if she got out. A couple minutes later, we see her up on her roof, so we know she was okay. We're inside the church. We're just taking a minute. And Lauren says, "Oh my God, there's another building loose." And I look out the window and I am just in disbelief that it can't be our building. It's not possibly our building. And I even said to Lauren, "No, that's not our building. My bird feeders aren't outside." And she said, "No, your apartment's underwater. That's ours. That's my lights. Those are my lights on the railing." And we run outside and we just watch our whole apartment wash away completely out of sight up the road. The pastor's daughter-in-law was there with her almost 1-year-old baby girl, and I went up to her and I said, "Do you by chance have any extra formula or breast milk or baby food?" And she was still exclusively breastfeeding at that time, so she had none, but said, "We're almost out of diapers even." And we had a whole sleeve in one of our dry bags, so I handed her a stack of diapers, and we got to share a moment as moms about how scary it was to just be in that situation. Once the baby settled inside with my mom, I step outside. Frank's phone had reception, and I was able to call Quinn and tell him that we got out and we were okay. And I sobbed for a second, but I knew I had to compose myself and keep it together in that moment. So I tell him we're okay. I tell him what's going on, where we're at. He says his cousin Ryan is on the way and his dad is on the way. And we know there's no way for him to get to us because the building is surrounded. And I look around and I see all the destruction and the flooding. And I realize that we're on high ground. The water's not coming up any higher. We're safe.
It was about 8:30 in the morning, and I was in the middle of just an early morning meeting when my mom called. And it's not like her just to call during work hours, and so I knew something was up, so I picked up the phone, and sure enough, she told me about the situation with Bonnie and Henry and Beth, and she said, "Can you call Aunt Dana to get the details?" So I called Aunt Dana immediately, and Aunt Dana filled me in, and she mentioned that Uncle Hank was making his way. He was about to head that way, and asked if I could go ahead and go, because I'm 3 hours east of them. They're in Middle Tennessee, and so I figured, well, I can definitely get there a lot quicker than Uncle Hank, and we definitely want to get there before things get worse. So I hung up the phone. I entered my meeting with Caleb. He prayed over me, and then I headed to the house. As soon as I got home, I was greeted with a duffel bag packed and ready to go. I grabbed some bottles of water, a couple other essentials, blankets, towels. I figured they'd be wet. I had some food. My wife had packed us a bag of snacks and food. And so, I figured surely I'd be back late that night. And so I quickly hugged my wife and kids and headed right out. 40 was pretty barren. Obviously, the further east I traveled, the more the crosswinds picked up on the interstate. It was rocking my truck back and forth, semis back and forth, and so as I was driving, I began to pray. I'm praying for Bonnie and Henry and Beth, because I know wherever they were in that moment, that they were probably pretty scared. So I just continued to pray. I didn't have anything on the radio. I was just rolling. As I got further and further, I got to that section in the mountains and the water running right next to 40. It was a big raging river. I drove through the tunnels, got to the other side of the mountains, and as soon as I got to the other side of the mountains, the landscape changed dramatically. As I drove further and further into Asheville, it got worse and worse. As soon as I came up on exit 55, I knew I was where I needed to be, so I got off and came right into an intersection that was pretty much shut down. There were a couple of law enforcement there. There were 20 or 30 bystanders watching an absolute rampage flood across Tunnel Road. I knew that Moffett Branch or Moffett Road is what could get me to Bonnie's, but that was completely underwater. There's a Quality Inn on the corner of Tunnel Road and Moffett. I pulled around the front of that, found the nearest spot to all the action, got out of my truck and began to assess, kind of assess the situation, figure out if there's a way that I could get to them.
So Quinn and Bonnie live over here. They're in the church up the hill over here, and there's a river dividing the only access point to them. They're stuck there. That's the church that they're at. And they're literally, I can't get to them. There's somebody out there.
I spoke to a first responder and asked if there's any way they could get to them, or how long will it be till they could bring them to safety. And he said it's going to be a while because they're safe, and that made sense. They began to start making rescue attempts, started unloading boats, attaching these special motors with special props to withstand all the debris in a situation like this. And so they were busy, and so I knew that they were safe. So I just went and grabbed my camera, started snapping some photos and asking questions, and was just kind of just another bystander with everybody else. I made my way to the back corner of the property again to see if I could lay eyes on Bonnie, see if she had made her way outside. And sure enough, I'm standing there and I feel like I could see her. I began to scream her name. I began to just yell, "Bonnie, Bonnie, Bonnie." And I just wanted her to know that I'd made it.
I'm outside on my phone trying to get reception to get in touch with Quinn, and I just hear somebody shouting, and it sounds like they're shouting my name, but nobody could possibly be shouting my name at that point. And I turn around, and across the way at the hotel is Ryan waving his arms. And he's there. Water rescue is on site, and they're telling us that they're going to evacuate us from the church and to pack our bags. So we're back inside, me and my mom, trying to distract the baby, keep the dogs calm, and pack our stuff back into a dry bag. And I'm terrified to get back in the water, even on a raft with safety officials with my baby. And Lauren comes inside and says they just flipped one of the life rafts. They flipped a boat. Everybody's okay, but they flipped a boat, and we looked at each other and we said, we're not getting on those boats. We're staying at this church as long as it takes.
So they're launching more rafts out. They ended up losing a raft. It capsized, and the occupants were rescued, but they were in the middle of a rescue. I mean, just crazy. And now there's a house that floated downriver and literally landed right here next to where we're standing. But I mean, I've never seen anything like this. Bonnie and Henry are safe. They're at the church. I don't know when they'll make it to safety over here, but waiting for them.
I witnessed people being pulled out of the water, brought near my truck. An ambulance pulls up. They're providing care to a lady who was trapped in one of the houses that had broken free. I look up the way to the back corner of the hotel, and I see water rescuers. They're soaking wet, and the operation that was happening was on the other end of the parking lot. They were down there at the corner. That's where the base of operations was. There's no reason why they should be coming from the opposite side of the parking lot. So sure enough, I intercepted one of the guys and was like, "Hey, were you not stuck over there at the church? How did you get over here?" And he's like, "There's a path." I was like, "Will you show me?" He said, "Sure." So I ran to my truck, threw my camera in, grabbed some bottles of water because I figured they didn't have any water, loaded my pockets up with them, really. And I made my way to where he had pointed, and he saw that I meant business, and he broke away from the rescuers and kind of led me to where they came from. And there was this ladder leaning up against this retaining wall. And he said, "Just climb over that. You can kind of see the path that we made, but you can get over there." I found that Moffett branch, it elevated and it ended up coming out of the water and it attached to this big whole hillside. But there was no way, there was no roads that connected. Moffett branch was the only way to this, I guess, little back area of this neighborhood. But I hiked up and down and down a steep, muddy slope. And sure enough, I came up on this big hill, across this little bridge, and asked somebody, hey, can I get to the church from here? There was somebody just out on the front porch, and they pointed. I walked through their yard and came up on the church where apparently Bonnie and them were at. I walk up to the door, open the door, and
there's about a dozen people there that live on the hill behind the church, and they're coming around and asking if we're okay and if we need anything. And I tell one of them, my mom got out with no shoes. Do you have shoes? So she goes to her home to find shoes. And I tell another one, we have no water. Do you have any extra water? So they go to their home to bring water, and I go back inside. I tell Frank and Lauren and my mom, there's water on the way and I have shoes on the way for your mom. And then I turn around and Ryan is standing in the doorway of the church holding 4 water bottles, completely dry, head to toe dry. And I ran to him and I hugged him, and I was so confused and so grateful to see him. My mom came over and took Henry so I could give him a real hug, not just a one-handed hug. And I think I said along the lines of, how did you get here? How did you get here? He told me there's a way out and we're gonna get out. So we get our bags ready.
All right, so I found where Bonnie and them are at. We're about to make our first trek. It's not easy. We'll see how this goes.
We had hope, and we knew we were getting out of the church. So Ryan led Frank and Lauren and 2 of the dogs and Miss Lynn on some back way to the hotel parking lot and got them settled, as my mom and I tried to clean up the church because there was debris and water everywhere and distracted baby at the same time.
so we set out on our first trek. I had Frank and Lauren, those were Bonnie and Quinn's neighbors. I had Miss Lynn and 2 dogs. And Lynn was my biggest concern. She was a little older, and I had worried that, there was a couple sections of this trek that were pretty difficult to get up. The streets were covered with trees. I mean, there was no other option but to kind of go the way that I had gone. And so we get to the little rickety bridge, cross that bridge one by one. We get to this big muddy hill. I mean, this hill's probably 20 foot, a little less than 20 feet. And it's muddy and hard to get up. But we do it. I help Lynn up. Frank and Lauren get up. And of course, we've got bags. We're carrying bags, stuff that belong to Frank and Lauren, to Beth and Bonnie. We make our way up this hill through these really sweet people's property. And we get to this section where I'm supposed to divert and go down to where the ladder was. So I go check to see if this is a route that we can still take. I get to the retaining wall, and water rescue, fire rescue, they had taken the ladder down and they were gone. They were nowhere over there anymore. I was like, what? So I went back up, rejoined the party, and we asked the really helpful neighbors there on the hill, like, is there another way to get to the backside of this hotel? And they pointed us to a direction. They led us through their property to the back of their property, which butted up against the Holiday Inn.
Made our way to the backside of Holiday Inn, walk into the truck to bring the truck up to the back of this parking lot because we can't get to my truck the way that I came. We're making 2 trips. First trip successful with 2 dogs.
Ryan comes back and it's our turn to go, and my biggest concern is getting my mom out. Being that she's a disabled veteran, she needs some extra help sometimes. So he tells us, there's a steep spot, but we got it. We can get out. We can do this. So we're going through this trek. We get to this 2 or 3 planks of wood, rickety bridge over a running creek. Couple foot drop below it, so we need to get across it. So I hand off Henry to the fellow that was helping us, and they say only 1 person at a time, so he goes across first because he's done it before, and then I go across. I take Henry back. My mom's dog goes, my mom goes. Some of the folks that live back in those hills were helping us, and at one point we get to a really steep, completely muddy hill. And Ryan looks at me and he says, I've done this before. I just did this. Do you want me to take Henry up? And I felt 100% trust in him, but terrified to hand off my child. So I hand him to Ryan, and I'll never forget Ryan wrapping the orange rope that they tied off at a tree around his arm, and just one arm going up while Henry cries in his other arm.
I have Henry in my arm, I'm holding onto this rope, and I'm inch by inch pulling myself up the side of this hill. And at any moment, I honestly felt like someone was gonna yell, "Cut!" like we were on the set of a movie. It was really kind of wild.
Then he has to hold him off. He has to hand him off to somebody at the top to get fully up. So I'm at the bottom of the hill, about a 20-foot hill again, and Henry's screaming, and I went up as fast as I could, slipping up the mud. And I got to Henry. He settled back down. They get my mom up. She's up safe.
And we were really grateful that rope was there. But we made it up to the top of that most difficult part.
Good job. Woo-hoo! Come on, Comanche, you got it. Nope, nope, not this way, that way. Let's go. Up, up, up. High ground, high ground.
Civilization.
We make our way to the hotel. I see Frank and Lauren in Ryan's truck. And that was the first time that I actually could breathe. We were away from the water, and I knew that we didn't have to go back. We're in the truck, we know we're okay, but we needed to get Frank and Lauren settled somewhere before we got out, because we agreed from the beginning it was all of us together. We were all gonna make sure each other were okay. That was the deal. So we checked this hotel that we're in the parking lot of. They have no rooms available. There's another hotel across the way. So we go there. On the drive over, we look in Tunnel Road is our apartment, just in pieces and matchsticks. So we get to that hotel. Frank goes in to check. They have one room available in the entire hotel. He comes out for his credit card and he says, you know, there's a woman inside complaining that there's no Wi-Fi and no power at the hotel. And, you know, we're all upset, but we're just trying to get them settled in. So before we drive away, I go in with a couple water bottles for them because Ryan had brought us some. And Frank pointed out to me the woman that was complaining earlier. And, you know, there's this young couple inside and they're asking, hey, are you from here? Are you from here? We're trying to find a way out. And I said, did you see the building right outside? That's where we came from. And of course, there's about 6 people in the lobby. Everybody's asking, what do you mean? What happened? So he said, you know, we just swam out of our 3rd story with my 1-year-old and our dogs and our neighbors and my mom, and that's where we came from. So we're also trying to get out. We're getting them settled. And the woman that was complaining about the Wi-Fi just jaw dropped, staring at us, utterly speechless. But the good news was we got Frank and Lauren into a hotel room and we knew they were going to be okay too. So they were safe. We got in the car with Ryan and we took off.